bonjour à toutes, je suis Benjamin Bass. J'ai appelé avec beaucoup de personnes aujourd'hui pour le religious discrimination. Just kidding, I'm not going to talk in French, but welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about really big problems that we face in today's society, and one of them being religious discrimination. In our podcast, we're going to confront the silent undercurrents of intolerance and explore the complexities of religious discrimination. I'm your host, Benjamin Bass, and we're going to embarking on a comprehensive journey through history, present-day policies, and personal narratives to understand how faith can divide or unite us. The roots of religious discrimination are deeply entrenched in human history. Winding back to ancient civilizations, these early societies often viewed religious comforting as synonymous with social harmony. Divergent beliefs that were not just heresy, but a form of social and political dissent. For example, the persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire weren't simply about beliefs, but also about controlling a group of seen as a threat to the established order. Moreover, when Christianity itself became the state religion, the tables turned. The very people who once suffered persecution became perpetrators against pagans and other non-Christian groups. This pattern repeated throughout history in a cycle of the oppressed becoming oppressors once they gained power. And this is just a few more examples of history that I'm going to be talking about. The medieval era saw the institutionalization of these prejudices. The Catholic churches was not just spiritual, but also political, influencing kingdoms and shaping policies. The Catholic Church, alongside Catholicism, ideologies, and beliefs were the main determining influence in the Crusaders, often romanticized in literature. But they were bloody conflicts that laid bare the intersection of faith and power, leaving a legacy of deep-seated mistrust between Christians and Muslims. And now we're going to talk about the Jewish community. The Jewish experience in Europe offers another thread in its historical tapestry. Accusations like the killing of deity against the Jews were used to justify centuries of anti-Semitism, culminating in pogroms and expulsion. Even as the Enlightenment began to question the power of the church, it did little to elevate the plight of religious minorities. And now, it's just unbelievable that these Jewish people went through some of these things, and that our history is unfolding in our very eyes. Like what we happen and see in Palestine and Israel, a lot of things are just unprecedented times. But now, history is not just about conflict among the major religions. It also includes the suppression of smaller sects and belief systems. For instance, the indigenous spiritual practices of colonized lands were often demonized and suppressed in favor of Christianity. But we must understand these historical narratives to grasp the full picture of today's religious discrimination. Each event, each era, contributed to a legacy that has helped shape the world's religious landscape. And now, shaping the religious landscape, we have to look at the current events and how that impacts political policies. Like moving on from annals of history to the headlines today. The influence of those early prejudices remain all too visible in modern policymaking. In Myanmar, for example, the Rohingya Muslims have been subjected to what many international observers described as ethnic cleansing. This is just unbelievable. That their plight is not just humanitarian crisis, but also just a testament to the enduring power of religious discrimination. Like, for example, in China, the Uyghur Muslims have a systematic campaign of repression. The government's so-called re-education camps are just a stark reminder that religious discrimination can be initialized in policy and justified in order of the use of national security. Like, these are not isolated incidents. Across Western democracies, debates on immigration and terrorism are often colored by undercurrent of religious ideas, policies that may appear neutral at first glance. It can have disproportionate effects on religious minorities, particularly Muslims post 9/11. They experience many things, like not only jokes across the media, and also just target bullying, even in schools. Like the media's role in shaping these events cannot be overstated. Like when the narrative surrounding a religious group is steeped in suspicion and fear, it can influence public perception and policy. This creates a feedback loop where policy is influenced by prejudice, which is then reinforced by media portrayal. And then back then, there wasn't even that much of a media portrayal, but now it's bigger than ever. With just the snap of just 2 swipes of your fingers, you can just look at the vast social media presence that we see today: Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, just to name a few social media sites that just have unprecedented amount of information that you can receive, and some of that information might be targeted towards these religious groups that just cannot be good. But that's not all the negative. These are all stories of communities coming together across religious lines, forming coalitions to challenge discrimination. These lines are a beacon of hope, showing that policies and attitudes can change for the better. But as we need someone for personal experience, behind every statistic and policy are personal stories, each one a testament to the human impact of religious discrimination. And today we're joined by my man Nathan Way, who currently shares their experience with us.
Hi, thanks for having me on tonight's podcast. Hello, my name is Nathan, and I would like to share some of my experiences on religious discrimination. Some information about the discrimination others face, and some of the affirmation, love, and care I can allocate for others who experience it. So first things first, I believe that as a community and society, religious liberty and tolerance among all different types of beliefs such as Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, and even Judaism are all essential and necessary towards the betterment of people. Because as people, we are all different, and ensuring that everyone can live comfortably is something that we should strive to aim for. And like me, everyone's purpose and beliefs are different. And while it is something that is different, it is something that I enjoy. The aspect that everyone is unique and different is something that I revel, which is why I am, once again, thankful for being able to participate in this opportunity. And I'm also thankful to be able to be here to share with you guys some of my experiences and what I am able to offer. So I, like many others, am Christian and American. I grew up in a Christian household and attending church at a very young age. And so despite being part of the large population of Christians and majority of people in the United States of America, there unfortunately are still instances of us being persecuted and discriminated against among the general population. For example, my beliefs may lead me to feel alienated and unfairly mistreated, with multitudes of people in today's generation. Like that example of feeling alienated and unfairly mistreated, I think there are a lot of other instances where Christians, even in a place where America gives Christians and the majority privileges, we may face discrimination. So for one case, Christians may face discomfort and restriction in public schools and education systems. Christians may find it difficult to express themselves, whether through traditional religious attire, whether you be Orthodox or Eastern European Christian, or promoting prayer in public schools, because certain schools and certain neutral policies must be enforced. And Christian groups and clubs may also actually find it difficult to actually acquire the same resources and time that they necessarily need in order for them to function, to meet, to congregate, to group, and to talk. And so certain adversities also may evince if sex education, gender, and evolution that may be advocated and taught in schools don't necessarily align with Christian ideologies. As a Christian, it's a pretty normal and normalized idea that comes from the Bible to maybe not agree with evolution, gender, and sex education. So certain adversities, certain topics like that being taught to me isn't necessarily my cup of tea, if that makes any sense. I've had experiences with being Christian in public schools with disagreement on what is being taught to me. As a Christian, it becomes restricting and constraining to be forced to take in certain concepts that don't make sense, completely contradict my logic, and also seem false. But as a strong Christian, understanding and hearing the things that essentially told my beliefs that they're fake and fabricated, are other known as quote unquote not real, is something that I don't necessarily want to hear. I'm sure my fellow Muslims and also like people who believe the Hindu belief don't necessarily want them being told that their beliefs are fake, they're not real, they're fabricated. And so I believe when I experienced this, I should have been able to have the same religious liberty and also not be told that my religion isn't necessarily real through the certain agendas and topics that public schools pushed. Another thing I've also experienced is the certain amount of stigma around me being Christian. And through my years in high school, whether high school, middle school, I found myself being ridiculed because of certain beliefs that I had. Albeit certain instances with me were most likely, where some of them were actually my fault. I might have lashed out a little too much. But overall, many people chose to look away and shun me alongside other Christians before showing them this faith that I had about these topics. And now in today's generation, it might not be super easy to talk about Christian topics and also controversial topics that don't necessarily align with the general status quo. So when in terms of in public schools, concepts and the certain things that they teach alongside the stigma that I've experienced, these are all certain adversities that and discrimination factors that I have experienced as a Christian. So that being said, being Christian in America isn't obviously the worst thing. It's in fact I come from a place of privilege, which is very nice, because most of America is actually Christian, and there are many different religions all around the world that don't necessarily have the same amount of freedoms that I am given. So, for example, many of my Muslim friends who are Sudanese, Algerian, even West African, a lot of them are my good friends, and there are certain things that I as a Christian, and I come from a place of privilege, obviously, can do for a lot of my Muslim friends and international students. And I believe that I can utilize some methods that actually ensure their safety and comfort. So as Christians and Muslims, I find that our beliefs are actually very similar. And there are certain things that me and other Muslims also share in common. And like brothers, I believe certain methods we can use are like interpersonal conversations. Like we talk about faith between both Christians and Muslims talk about faith, and we can find out that we have a lot more in common. Share some events, parties, and gatherings, and advocacy of relationships between both Christians and Muslims. And as Christians, I think we can also identify cases of prejudice, discrimination, and bigotry that certain Muslims may experience. Maybe not necessarily on the daily, but just occasionally, if we do see certain things like that happen, we can share our empathy and also show them affirmation and comfort. Even though those are the very surface level things that we can do as Christians, I think in order to make that full-fledged step, you have to take the first basic one. So I think that the first thing and the most necessary thing that we can do is at least show our empathy and also try to get to know them better. So thank you for having me on this podcast, and go back to you.
And now, their experience is echoed in letters from our listeners, revealing a mosaic of prejudice. These stories range from subtle social slights to overt workplace discrimination. They remind us that religious intolerance is not a relic of the past, but a present reality for many. Like, each narrative invites us to walk in someone else's shoes, to see the world through their eyes. It's a powerful reminder that fight against religious discrimination is not about just laws and policies, but also changing hearts and minds. Like, my friend Nathan always sees us praying, doing things that are not always religion, but showing respect is what one person needs. And having that open-mindedness and willing to not only share this public spaces, but embrace it. Embrace the differences. And not only him being different than us, but being our friend, let alone, is just, I think, a step in the right direction of what this generation, I think, needs to do that. And how we do that is intersectionality, with amplified discrimination. Religious discrimination often doesn't stand alone. It just intersects with other forms of prejudice, amplifying discrimination experienced by individuals. This is where the concept of intersectionality becomes crucial to our discussion. Like, we need to consider the experience of a Muslim woman of color living in a Western country as she navigates a complex life, wearing the hijab, but people don't understand that. And we need to have a moral compass, and we need to understand where these people come from and accept them who they are. And now, as we prepare to conclude today's podcast and episode, it's essential to recognize that the journey, the tangled underbrush of faith, prejudice, has been both an enlightening and sobering. We've traveled across the echoes from ancient times to the pressing of immediacy of the present day, and heard the deeply personal stories that humans face in the vast tableau of religious discrimination. And the path forward. We need to move the path forward. The path forward is neither simple nor straightforward. It's a path of interception, education, and empathy. We show how historical precedents sets the stage for modern prejudice, and how current policies perpetuate these biases, and how personal experience bring the statistics painfully to life. We've also glimpsed the potential for unity and the power of collective action. Like I said, as we move forward, we must ask ourselves how we, as individuals, as a society, can contribute to a world where faith no longer divides us, but enriches our collective experience. This requires a commitment to understanding and respecting religious diversity, to not only recognizing and confronting our own biases, but to stand in solidarity with those who face discrimination. And there's more to that. Education is our most important, potent weapon in this fight. By educating ourselves about different religions and their histories, we foster a culture of tolerance, encouraging curiosity over fear, dialogue over assumption, and understanding over ignorance. Could bridge the divides that have been millennia in the making. It's unbelievable. But in our increasingly interconnected world, the true ripple effects of our actions and the policies of our governments are felt far and wide. It's up to ensure these ripples become waves of positive change. We must champion policies that protect religious freedom and promote inclusion, not out of begrudging sense of duty, but because diversity and belief is much of part of human tapestry, and as the air we breathe. We've also learned that today's stories have power. They power to change our minds, to stir compassion, to drive action. Let's commit to listening these stories, to amplify voices that are often silenced, and to writing new narratives of coexistence with respect. And as for my man Nathan, who shared a wonderful story in the journey to overcoming prejudice and personal, but also collective, it's a series of small steps by many people leading to a giant leap for mankind. And so we need to wrap up today's podcast. Let's not make it this end of the conversation. Let it be the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, where we actively choose to be a part of the solution, to advocates for justice, and to peacemakers, who faith by faith, prejudice by prejudice, dismantle the walls that separate us and build bridges in their stead. Thank you for joining us, Faith and Prejudice. Until next time, let's keep the faith and stand against prejudice together. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci beaucoup.